I'm Jay Edidin.
And I'm Miles Stokes.
And we're the hosts of Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men, a weekly podcast all about the ins, the outs, and the retcons of comics' greatest superhero soap opera.
We're also the hosts of Jay and Miles Review the X-Men,
which you're watching right now,
where we talk about the X books that come out each week.
This week, we are wrapping up the last of the pre-ResurrXion books, or ResurrXion? I still can't keep those straight.
Certainly not just Resurrection, nothing like that.
No, but we are wrapping those up, and also, I think, beginning the first, technically, ResurrXion title with X-Men Prime.
Indeed. We have one foot in each world, and it's actually kind of an exciting place to be. So let's talk about those issues.
We have 3 feet.
I do.
First up, we've got the 19th and final issue of All New X-Men, written by Dennis Hopeless with art by Paco Diaz and colors by Nolan Woodard. So this wraps up what has been, I think, the strongest team title of the current line. Strongest title overall definitely still goes to All New Wolverine, but we have really, really enjoyed this book, and the finale is no exception. Does a great job of tying up some of the disparate threads, and also of answering one of the big questions that's plagued this book on and off from the start of why the team can't go home.
It answers it really nicely, too, and it doesn't just answer it in terms of plot, it answers it in terms of character. That was one of the things I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
When the team takes a look at, what happened to their timeline, it's through the lens of, hey, we were wondering about that, but also through the lens of Cyclops, who has had such a hard time dealing with this new world that he's found himself in from the start, and especially since older Cyclops did the noodle incident thing, or didn't, as the case may be.
Sort of, maybe, at least since the noodle incident.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, If there's a weakness to this issue, it's the general lack of Evan and Edie.
Yeah.
They do not get tied into that sort of neat thematic bundle, as well as I'd like to. And I mean, that's been kind of a low-key issue with the series in general. Like, it's very obviously one that's about the originals, and they are more along for the ride. The bits we've seen of them were and continue to be lovely, but I'd love to have seen more focus on those two characters.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this era right now where books renumber at number 1 relatively regularly. Marvel calls it the season model, and I think it's maybe overall a decent idea.
You know what? As a retailer, as someone who works at a comic shop, I hate it so much.
I guess it's hard to figure out what goes in what order.
It is so hard to shelve these. It is so hard to explain, you want this All New X-Men, not that All New X-Men, to people who are new to it. It makes ordering a pain.
That I believe, and that bothers me as well, because I like having everything lined up all neat and clear on the shelf.
Yeah, and it'll turn out that, this series, for example, has a subtitle. Did you know that?
Inevitable, right?
The whole series does, yes.
Okay.
Did you know that? I didn't know that. It's not in the books.
I knew it when I saw the trade.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess where I was going with that is that while I do like the season thing overall, it does mean that for cool plot elements like, for instance, Evan and Edie being a member of this team, they're not going to be around in X-Men Blue, this book's successor.
Right.
It's going to have a different writer, it's going to have a different premise, it's going to have a similar lineup, but not those characters. And I wish we'd gotten more time. Like, some of the books I'm eager to see rebooted. Uncanny X-Men, Extraordinary X-Men, sure. But with this, I would have loved just to see more.
This isn't even like seasons. This is like if it were seasons, but every season were pretty much a different show.
Yeah.
Or functionally a different show. Like
Angel season 4 to season 5?
No.
Oh.
Not even. I mean, because it's a different setup, it's a different lineup, it's a different creative team, etc. It's not. They're not like volumes or chapters of the same thing. But that said, as transitions go, I think this is a good one. It leaves me excited and optimistic about the title that's spinning out of it, which is X-Men Gold?
Blue.
Blue. I can never remember. Sorry.
So I want to talk a little bit about the Scott and Jean thing, because I really enjoyed that.
I really liked it. I thought it was very, very, very good closure for that storyline, because it's sort of left off in a lot of tense people not really saying things spaces. And this just wraps it up well with they still have feelings for each other, and both of them know it's a bad idea and aren't going to pursue them, and that's okay. Yeah,
this really just brings, in bringing Jean back to this issue, because of course she's been absent for almost the entire series, it really does showcase just how well those 5 work together. Not just because they all got pulled out of time, but just because of who they are.
It also showcases something else that I think is even more important, which is how much those 5 have grown up as a group and individually in this timeline. As opposed to the other one.
Yeah, I mean,
this is a very, very different group of original 5 X-Men than the ones at the same relative age were in the Silver Age. And they've got a very different team dynamic, and Gina's leading them, which about damn time.
Right.
But yeah, I really like the way that that's shifted, and I really like how differently they interact now than they did, when they first came back through, and how much that change has tempered them as individuals and as a team.
Mm-hmm. So we looked at sort of the series as a whole when we did the last issues of Uncanny X-Men and Extraordinary X-Men last time. So I kind of feel like we should do the same with Dennis Hopeless's All New X-Men, which I guess is Volume 2 of All New X-Men.
Yeah. Well, as I said at the beginning of this review, this has consistently been the strongest of this group of team titles, and it's been one that we've enjoyed heartily. Of all of the books, and Dennis, has talked about this on our show in a couple of episodes, it's the one that's been least bogged down by the events that have been going on around it, and that's had the most of the dynamics that we tend to go back to X-Men for, the coming-of-age stuff, the identity stuff, and the really good mix of adventures and character-focused story.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that Hopeless is still going to be doing some X-Men work, and I'm really pleased the original 5 are still going to be in the present day. It looks like that's for the long haul at this point. I mean, it's been years at this point.
Yeah.
At the same time, God, seeing Dennis Hopeless write and Mark Bagley draw these characters in this book has just been a goddamn pleasure. If you have not been following the series, it'll all be in trade pretty soon, and, just check it out, please.
I've enjoyed Bagley, but I have not enjoyed him as consistent. I actually haven't enjoyed the art on this book in general nearly as consistently as the writing. I think Bagley is a strong artist, but I think he's got a couple of faults that came out especially strongly on this title. And honestly, the art is one of the few things that I feel like the last issue didn't have going for it in a lot of places. Diaz is good at some things. Perspective is often not one of them. And bodies in motion in perspective is very much not one of them, at least in context of this book. To an extent that I found actually kind of distracting. I noticed it in particular with Cyclops because he's the one who gets stuck in action-y poses the most frequently in this.
Also, he was zapping the hell out of a car for a lot of it.
Yeah, and he was doing it with his head rotating at angles that heads don't rotate, and
I'd imagine he has very strong neck muscles.
And almost always front and center in the panel, so you couldn't not notice it. So that was a little bit awkward. But yeah, Bagley. This wasn't Bagley. I really wish Bagley had been here to finish out the series because looking at these scenes, I think this is a story he would have handled beautifully, and this is one that I wish Diaz is no slouch, and I would have liked to have seen him do a bit better here. Again, a lot of it's really good. It's just that the places that are off are so glaringly off.
But overall, I freaking love this issue. I thought it was a damn solid ending to a damn solid series.
The actual ending is a little bit silly and a little bit anticlimactic.
Oh, I thought it was great.
Great.
Well,
I was going to say, but it works really well with the tone of the book so far.
Next, we have Old Man Logan number 20, written by Jeff Lemire with art by Felipe Andrade and colors by Jordan Boyd. So this is Gone Real Bad, part 2 of 2. It's been a very short story, which seems to exist at this point, it looks like, primarily to lead into the next story, Past Lives.
Yeah, man, my main complaint about this one, it's a fun story. It should have taken place over maybe 8 pages of the first issue of Past Lives.
Right, because what we've had happening basically is Logan deciding he needs to go back to the wasteland that he came from in the future, him asking a bunch of people and them saying no, and then him busting into a prison, fighting Spider-Man briefly, and getting a prisoner named Asmodeus to use his magic to send him through time. And that's it. That's all that's happened over the course of 2 issues. Now,
and he gets sent back to the wrong time.
Yes, he does. Now, we've seen this kind of pace in Old Man Logan before. I think with Andrea Sorrentino's art, we've very much seen it, where not a lot will happen, but it will all happen beautifully and in great expressive detail. Yeah,
Sorrentino has this incredible sort of pensive lyrical style, and even then, honestly, sometimes it felt a little slow. One of the big weaknesses of this book is that it tends to take multiple issue stories to do what could be done better in a montage.
The last Ronin story I thought was the most noticeable example of that.
Oh, yeah.
And Felipe Andrade is a different artist, obviously, and his work, while I enjoy it thoroughly, it's got that same kind of, not lazy, but I guess slow style to it, or rather fast, as the case may be.
Yeah, Andrade, I think of Andrade as an artist who's much better suited to and tends much more frequently to do more sort of fast-moving and action-paced stuff. He's got that very kind of almost animatorly, very sort of loose line art, which is great, but again, just doesn't have that kind of slow. If we're going for musical analogies, I might put Sorrentino as say Godspeed You Black Emperor, and then Andrade as something much more sort of poppy.
Yeah, agreed.
And much more dynamic.
So there are some strange pacing issues. I wouldn't say they're problems exactly. I just will say that I read this issue very, very quickly. And, I mean, if I'm spending $4 on an issue, a little bit more to chew on is always nice. That said, it's fun. I mean, we have Old Man Logan having no patience for Asmodeus's, Bronze Age dramatics, and we have Andrade drawing a great Asmodeus looking very, very 70s.
Yeah, it's silly and it's fun, and Andrade is a good fit tonally for it. I think the only real problem with this arc is that it's just about 4 times as long as it needs to be.
Yeah, and so we'll see what Past Lives looks like. I mean, from what we've seen from the covers at least, and from where this issue leaves us, apparently it's going to be Logan going through various eras that he's lived through, kind of in rapid-fire succession, which is a cool place to take Old Man Logan, especially...
It's been done before with mainstream Logan, and based on when the timelines split... This just seems like a Wolverine's Past book.
I feel okay with that. Old Man Logan, it's gone in a number of directions. This could be cool. And Past Lives will also be Jeff Lemire's final arc on the book before a new writer takes over, so hopefully he'll pull out all the stops. I'm very curious to see where that goes. But yeah, certainly not the kind of abrupt stop that All New Wolverine had or that any of the team books had pre-Resurrection. It's just sort of the end of the intro to the next story, which, sure, why not?
Finally, we've got the beginning of a new era, X-Men Prime, written by Mark Guggenheim, Greg Pak, and Cullen Bunn, with art by Ken Lashley, Ibrahim Robinson, and Leonard Kirk, with Guillermo Ortega. Colors by Maury Hollowell, Frank Darmada, and Michael Garland.
That is a few people.
It's a lot of comic, and it's I think, pulling together teams from a number of the different books that are be coming out in the ResurrXion line. Mm-hmm. So this is, for all intents and purposes, Astonishing X-Men #1.
It kind of is, yeah. I read a review earlier today that had compared the transition from the Extraordinary Era of X-Men to X-Men Prime to being sort of like a less intense version of the Morrison to Whedon. That's
a rough comparison, and that's a comparison that does not leave the current era looking very good.
Well, no,
I gotta say, those are 2 of the all-time best runs of X-Men.
Mm-hmm. But it does have that same feeling of, okay, let's be goddamn heroes again.
Yeah, it's got that, and it's framed around the same character. It's Kitty Pryde returning to the X-Men after an extended hiatus in space, breaking up with the movie guy.
Star-Lord.
Yeah, him. Sorry, I kind of make a point of forgetting.
Snob.
No, it's a Ron Swanson move. I just don't want him to think we're too close.
Oh, okay, that's legit.
Yeah. Anyway. And as such, it is pulling a lot of nostalgia strings very deliberately. The most noticeable one for me is that Kitty looks an awful lot like Kate Pryde in Days of Future Past. She's basically wearing the outfit. She's got the hairstyle. She looks distinctly older.
And I like that because you'd mentioned earlier when we were talking that you can track the history of the X-Men through Kitty sometimes because she's the one that gets to age visibly. She started out as a little girl. She was 13.
Well, and she's the one who's been around a long time and who tends to be the one who brings back sort of the central idealism of the X-Men, who represents that to a lot of the major characters, like Storm in particular, I think.
Yeah, the idea of Storm having gotten disillusioned after Inhumans versus X-Men and trying to quit and to bring Kitty back to take her place, as much as I wouldn't want to see that happen, and thankfully it won't, that rings true for both characters. Their interaction here, it works, and honestly, their interaction is kind of the core of what X-Men is for me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, passing that torch and that generational transition. And I think, I was really on the fence about the idea of Kitty as leader of the X-Men coming in on X-Men Gold. On X-Men Gold. And this sold me on that idea. It is not, I think, the strongest intro issue ever. Again, it doesn't really hold up in comparison to the most obvious comparison at Courts. But it's still solid, and it leaves me cautiously pretty optimistic for the team books in the line in ways that I hadn't necessarily been before.
It also sold me on the idea of the X-Mansion in the middle of Central Park, which seemed ridiculous when I heard about it. But this book makes a great argument for every single aspect of where the line is going. At least everyone it addressed. I mean, it addresses basically X-Men Gold, X-Men Blue, and Weapon X, and that's about it.
Well, and as we know from the era of X-Factor that we're currently covering on the podcast, if the X-Men have a history of anything, it's of flouting New York zoning.
That is absolutely true. Speaking of the other books, what did you think about the X-Men Blue and Weapon X lead-ins?
Less intrigued by the Weapon X lead-in. I like the version of Lady Deathstrike that Pak is writing, though. And I like the villain. She's kind of evil out of candy.
She looked great. Anybody who can get impaled and then call in an airstrike on the person that impaled her is good in my
While
book.
remaining that relatively impeccable. That was fun.
Yes.
Loved the X-Men Blue.
Yeah. So, I mean,
the color right.
In the last issue of All New X-Men, we have the characters at a rest stop thinking about what comes next, which is the perfect freaking metaphor. And in this, I mean, when Kitty goes to see them and then what she realizes has already happened and the way it already happened and the way the kids handled it, I like that the original 5, they're not just going to step in line. They're not just going to be in lockstep with Xavier's dream. They're going to do their own thing. They're going to make their own future. And that is reinforced so hard here.
Yeah, that is a great touch. And yeah, that does dovetail nicely with the current X Factor situation, or the current past X Factor situation.
Yes, exactly. 1990.
Something like that. So yeah, it's fun. It's interesting. I don't know how indicative it's going to be of how the line's going to feel, but as a teaser, as an appetizer, I enjoyed it fairly solidly. It's maybe not, artisanal, but it's some damn good potato skins. I don't know.
Damn good potato skins. Jan Miles Review the X-Men. Put that on the back of your trade.
I think that might have been Brett White's metaphor from Twitter earlier today, or at least with Chili's appetizers.
Huh. There's like 3,000 calories. I think they would kill you, but they're so good.
It's okay. Well, obviously they wouldn't, because we've eaten them before.
Oh, I mean, not immediately. But anyway, with X-Men Prime, yeah, I'm really...
It also probably won't kill you.
It probably won't kill you. Put that on the back of your trade. But I'm really excited about ResurrXion. I am really excited about where the line is going in a way that I didn't think I would be about X-Men, honestly, ever again. I thought it was just going to be a 90s retread with the blue gold, but we have elements from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and later all crammed into this one issue, surprisingly deftly.
And I really like how solidly and explicitly it is about moving forward, about the team growing and about change. Because that's something, I mean, there's a lot of everything changes now. But seeing deliberate steps, and even if that change is temporary, even if there's going to be, a season of this and then status quo reversion, it still feels like concrete steps.
So, 3 books, 2 of the old era, 1 of the new. What's our favorite?
Our pick this week is All New X-Men number 19. It's a great wrap-up to what has consistently been the strongest team title of this era of X-Men. What's our panel of the week?
I think we have to go for this splash page of Storm from early in X-Men Prime, number 1. She is, the word I keep coming back to is breathtaking. I mean, it's a beautiful character here, obviously, but just the level of power and of majesty and of hope, the level of reminding Kitty Pryde, who's been gone for so long, of what the X-Men can be. Yeah,
she looks lowercase c celestial.
Yeah.
And this is a page and a panel that's been done before many times, but this is a particularly good rendering of it.
That's it for this week. Thanks for watching.
If you like what you've seen here but would prefer it without our faces, check out our podcast, Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men. New episodes go up every Sunday at explainthexmen.com, also on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Miles, what have we got for them this week?
This time, it is some more Excalibur fill-ins, which is more exciting than it sounds, I assure you, because it's so weird. So much weird stuff happens.
Megan turns into a mermaid and a vampire.
She does both of those things, one after the other.
Not in the same issue.
No. But still, impressive, right?
That podcast, these video reviews, and everything at explainthexmen.com are brought to you by our Patreon subscribers. We're an entirely listener-supported project, and those are the folks who keep us on the air and entirely ad-free. If you'd like to join their ranks, you can do that at the link either above or below this video.
In the meantime, that's it for this era of X-Men, so we will see you next week for the next.
What do you want to do for tag?
Let me think. I don't know.
I'm just going to use this.